Hey guys, welcome back to the show with worse facial hair consistency than the hair consistency in Series 8. Today, we are continuing our 2 weeks of Doctor Who content ahead of the 60th anniversary specials. We're doing 2 consecutive weekly live streams, one this coming Monday and one the following Monday, where we talk all things Doctor Who ahead of and during the 60th anniversary specials. Today we are on episode 5 of ranking every episode of New Who. This is series 5. It aired in 2010. We are also including the 2010 Christmas special. So if you're familiar with the first 4 episodes that we did, we linked the Christmas specials with the season that followed it. With Matt Smith, I think it makes more sense to link the Christmas specials with the season before, just because of the way that the Christmas specials are lined up. So we have the 13 episodes of Series 5 here, along with A Christmas Carol, the 2010 Christmas special. So we will be starting from bottom to top like we have been. My least favorite episode is actually in D tier, which is a good sign. So I don't have any season 5 episodes in F tier, which is a great sign. My lowest episode is going to be The Beast Below. Let me find it here. Beast Below, Beast Below, Beast Below. I have a bunch of issues with this episode. I've tried to go back and rewatch this and find things I like, because I know a lot of people actually do like this episode. The performance by Matt Smith is phenomenal. The resolution that, Amy kind of solves this issue, that the companion is the one to realize that there's hope in this situation, is something that we don't usually see in Doctor Who. And people who really like this episode, those are points that they pick out as like why they like this episode. I would agree with those points, but I think the negatives of this episode are way too great. Early season, so we start really strong with the 11th hour. We'll talk about the 11th hour when we get there, but the early few episodes of Series 5, I think, are pretty weak. This one especially is followed by Victory of the Daleks, which we'll talk about next. But this episode specifically, I don't like the setting of it. I don't like the design of Starship UK. I think the Star Whale looks tacky. I think the CGI is really bad. I think the inclusion of the Smilers, or the Smiler bots, doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't make a ton of sense. I've never really understood certain elements of this story, regardless of how many times I watch it. There are elements of this episode that just don't really fit cohesively. It just kind of it acts like this mystery story, but none of the elements of the mystery story are like propelling the story forward. It's like one thing happens and then another thing happens and then another thing happens, but none of them flow very well together. This episode has always been a slog for me to get through. Like I said, I've watched this episode numerous times to try to see if I can like it any more than I did the last time, and I just really don't. I think, is it Hawthorne? Who's the primary villain character? I think he's super underdeveloped, doesn't make a ton of sense as the villain of the piece. I think this episode just falls flat in everything they tried to do with it, and there were a lot of huge concepts and a lot of good ideas that, had they been executed more efficiently, this could have been a good episode. But I've never liked this episode. I still don't like this episode. It's the bottom of season 5 for me. Let's move up then. I'm checking my list here. Let's move all the way up then to the one I also just talked about, the one that immediately follows this, and that is Victory of the Daleks, still in D tier, but right above Beast Below here, if it will slide into that spot. Victory of the Daleks is kind of fun, actually. I like the setting. I like the Daleks being in World War II. I like the first half of this episode. And my take on this is probably going to be the same as most people on this. It's the first half of this episode is really fun. It's a cool atmosphere. We see good performances from Matt Smith. We see a fun performance by Karen Gillan. I like Winston Churchill in this episode. I like Bracewell in this episode. The problems arise when you get to the colorful Daleks, the paradigm Daleks. Now, I don't hate the fact that they're colorful as much as some people do. I think it's this cool idea. One thing that I kind of compare it to in its conceptualization is like the battle droids and the clones from like the Star Wars prequels, right? So like the commanders will have different colors. Now, granted, their entire armor isn't one color, so I think that might be a little bit of a misstep. But like, I understand what they were going for like the different divisions of the Dalek hierarchy with the colors here. The huge problem with that scene, with like the colorful Dalek scene, is the set design, and that being that the ceiling is too low in this scene. You can't really see it with how small it is on your screen there, but the ceiling is too low, and therefore Matt Smith seems taller than he is. And instead of making the Paradigm Daleks seem as big as they should be, which was what they were going for, because these Daleks are significantly bigger than other Daleks, it makes the other Daleks seem smaller. And that, I think, is more an issue, like I said, with the set design. I don't like the Dalek spaceship. I don't think it looks good at all. I think it was super lazy. I think they ran out of budget and just put something together in a little warehouse. You compare that to one of like the Dalek ships from the Tennant era or even the Eccleston era, a lot more thought went into it, and you can tell that they got really lazy with this episode. I think the end of this episode really falls apart, doesn't really go together. I like the idea of the Spitfires in space is kind of fun, but it doesn't look good and it doesn't feel good in execution. I think all of this stuff with the relationship drama, not relationship drama, but the I can't remember the side character, the female side character's name, who her husband dies. I think that's super underdeveloped. I like the little performance with Karen Gillan and I can't remember the name of the actor who plays Bracewell, but I like their little interaction at the end where they talk about life in Scotland and the girl he used to have a crush on. I like that element, but I think most of the last half of this episode really falls flat. Like I said, I don't have as much of an issue with the Daleks being colorful as I do the actual design and look of these Daleks, and the delivery of it and execution of that scene, I think is worse than anything. So I am putting Victory of the Daleks D tier there. Next, let's move up to Cold Blood. Now, this is the second half of the two-parter with the Sontarans, and I'm sticking this also in D tier. The first half of the Sontaran two-parter I don't hate. It is a Chris Chibnall episode. So a lot of Doctor Who fans don't love it for that sake alone. I actually don't mind the first half. I think the first half does... Where do I have... We'll talk about the first half more when we get there. But the second half is a political drama. It loses all the mystique of the first half. It's really boring. It's basically people sitting in a room and talking, and not in like the fun Game of Thrones political thriller way, not in like the fun House of Cards political thriller way. This is just political drama in my Doctor Who, and it's really boring, and I hate it. And there's kind of some tension with this, like the human survivors have to go bring the body of one of the Silurians back down, and what's going to happen once we get down there? And nothing happened. Like, literally nothing happens. The only thing that happens in Cold Blood of substance is the Rory drama at the end, where he dies and is sucked out of existence. That's good. That is the only redeeming quality about this episode for me. It loses so much momentum for what was built up in the first half. Like I said, I really do like the first half of this episode, or of this two-parter. We'll talk about it when we get there. But Cold Blood is just a slog. It's boring. I like the world design. I like the design of the Silurian underground world. I like all of the character performances in this, but I don't like this episode at all. I really like the first part. I don't like the second part. Moving up then to The Lodger. There are 4 episodes in D tier for me. The Lodger is the top of those 4. I'm not a James Corden fan. A lot of Americans aren't James Corden fans. A lot of British people, a lot of Brits are not James Corden fans either. He's good in this episode. I actually really like James Corden in this episode. Not so much in his Series 6 episode. I think Craig is a fun side character. I like that they had to do the companion light episode, and so they did this, which I'm totally fine with. I like that in concept. I think this episode is better than it should be. It's got kind of a weak story, but the performances are really good. I like all of the relationship tension and drama. It kind of reads as like a rom-com, and I'm fine with that. Like, rom-coms in Doctor Who have been done really well. We'll talk about that more as we get into the Capaldi era. It doesn't feel like this episode's very consequential, and it's not. It's kind of like the last ditch before the finale, and so I understand why it's inconsequential, but I think that takes away from the overall feel of this episode. I think Matt Smith is really fun in this episode, if not a little campy, to the point where he starts to feel more like season 6 11th Doctor. Does that make any sense? So the Doctor, the way he's characterized, is a lot different in Series 6 than he is in Series 5. Series 5, he's much more serious. He's much more, you feel a threat from him, whereas he gets a little too silly in Series 6 and Series 7, and you start to feel that in this episode specifically. But his performance is fun. I don't mind it. It's just very inconsequential. It's one of those, you could skip it and you would not miss anything. Despite the fact that it kind of does set up the silence in Series 6, you would never know if it is inconsequential for you to skip this episode and still understand the entire silence arc in Series 6. Moving up then to C tier. My bottom of C tier, I'm looking through here, is going to be Vampires of Venice. So this is the one that, of course, starts with the stag scene, which is also one of those scenes where the Doctor starts to feel like they're losing the seriousness of his character. The fact that he doesn't quite understand human interaction doesn't really fall in line with the 10th Doctor's characterization. Why he would lose that so suddenly is not really explored. And it doesn't really make sense for his character arc in the first half of Series 5. I like this episode. I like that they shot it on location. I think they shot it... Did they shoot it in Croatia? They didn't shoot it in Italy, but they shot it in like that Mediterranean area. And it shows very well. It's a very... I like the atmosphere that this episode pulls. Helen McCrory is great as Madame that character. And the other gentleman who plays Salador San in Game of Thrones also is phenomenal in this character, where it's a father who thinks he's setting his daughter up for success and then loses his daughter. I think his performance is phenomenal as well. What I don't like about this episode is I don't like any of the Amy Rory stuff. I think their relationship is written very poorly in this episode. I think Amy starts to get she gets really dislikable at the end of the last episode, and that continues on in this episode. I'm not a huge fan of Amy as a character. I think that she's kind of a B word, for lack of a better term, and I think that Rory deserved much better than her. And this is really where her character falls apart for me, or starts to fall apart. And I don't like any of the drama there. I don't like the way that she promotes herself in a negative light towards her relationship. I don't like any of the interactions that they have with the vampires and with the Saturnine characters. It's a really mid-tier episode for me. I don't hate it, but I also, like, nothing about this stands out in a... I shouldn't say that, because I said, like, I like the set design, I like the feel of this episode, I like the performances in this episode, but I don't love the story. I don't like the Amy and Rory stuff, and for me, like, everything balances out to a very average episode. That's why I'm putting it C tier. Next, we move up to B tier. And we are going to go with... Oh man, we are working our way up here. I hope I'm not missing one. I really hope I'm not missing one because this doesn't seem right. Oh, there we go. Okay, C tier or B tier, excuse me, is going to be the Angels two-parter, Time of Angels and Flesh of Stone. And much like the hold on. That's not right. That's not right. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Bear with me. Bear with me. I'm looking at my list here. This is super unprofessional, but I gotta go back and double check something real quick. Lodger, Vampires of Venice, and then we move up to season 5, The Hungry Earth. Okay, bottom of B tier is going to be The Hungry Earth. So I do think there is that much of a quality difference between the first half of the Sontaran two-parter and the bottom half. I like it. It's still a Chris Chibnall episode, so it fumbles the finale. But this has the benefit of being split as 2 separate episodes. So the first half of this episode, I actually really like. I think the performances are great. I like the side characters, and that's not something I usually say about a Chibnall episode. I think all of the side characters are developed in a decent way. Not all great, but we understand all of the side characters and their motivations and that sort of thing. They're not all likable, which is fine. I think the whole concept of this basically steals the plot a little bit of Inferno, which is a third Doctor story from the 70s, where basically humans are drilling down to Earth and it's going to cause some problems. This essentially steals that plot element of it, which is fine. I really like Inferno. I don't hate the redesign of the Silurians. I know a lot of people didn't like them. They made them way too human. They took away the third eye, that sort of thing. I don't mind the way they look. I think the makeup is still really great. I like the horror of this episode. I like that they add the plot element where they basically black out the sky for that section of the plot. I like the claustrophobic church feel. I like the whole atmosphere that this episode brings. I think it does really well with playing with tension. I think it sets up just kind of this mystery of the Silurians. I don't think it fumbles the Silurians at all. I do not. Like, even the reveal of, what is her? It's not Aaliyah, is it? Whichever of the Silurians comes up to the surface, when they reveal her, I don't hate the reveal as much as some people do. I do wish they would have kept the masks on. I think the mask look is a much better look for them. But I still don't hate the design. And I think, like I said, I think this episode plays really well with tension. It's written very well, but it just fumbles the second half, which is normal for a Chibnall episode. So B tier for me, bottom of B tier. Then we move up to Time of Angels and Flesh of Stone. Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. So this is the two-parter with the Angels. And Series 5 has a problem. This is Doctor Who in general, usually, where the first half of a two-parter is better than the second half. Much like why I like The Hungry Earth, I also like Time of Angels because it plays really well with tension. It sets up this mystique of the angels. It doesn't fumble the angels the way the second half does, which this two-parter does a lot of things that I don't like with the angels, and I'm not original in this take. I don't like the concept of the image of the angels being an angel kind of thing, which the first half introduces, and then I don't like the second half where they show the angels moving. It completely takes away the mystique. I don't like that the angels are killing people because they have enough energy that it sustains them. This two-parter takes away a lot of the mystique of Blink. Now, it was written by Stephen Moffat, so like who am I to judge the creator's decision on them? But as a villain, I think this takes away the mystique of the Weeping Angels, and that's disappointing. I think River's song is good in this episode. I don't love her at the start of it. I think she is more. How do I describe this? And this might be a character development thing, and which is fine. It's hard to judge character development on a character who you meet backwards. Her character development is written really well. Plus, it's in the reverse order. So the negative you get from that is when you meet her when she's younger, you like her less and less, at least in my opinion. And I don't like the part of River's character where she's kind of this femme fatale. Like, I like when she flirts with the 10th Doctor. I don't like when she gets over-sexualized the younger she gets. Does that make any sense? And so I don't love that aspect of her in the first half of this episode. I like the maturity that she had in Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. I don't like that the younger she gets, she's flirting with everybody, and that becomes her main character motivation. I like the archaeologist that we met when we first met her in the series. I think this starts to put a downward spiral on her character a little bit. Obviously, we have just the garbage scene with Amy at the end of Flesh and Stone, where she basically sexually assaults the Doctor. Amy is a fine character in this episode until the end of Flesh and Stone. And that's where the problems arise. She was fun with her being flirty. Like the fact that she's a kissogram when we meet her, like, isn't a negative part of her character. She becomes, to me, a dislikable character when she starts flirting with everybody, when she takes advantage of Rory, when she completely disregards Rory, when she puts the Doctor over everybody else, kind of thing. I'm not original in any of these takes. This is stuff you've probably heard before, but I really don't like the second half of this episode. But it still B tier. It's still a B tier episode for me because I think that the horror elements are still great. I think that despite the fact that it kind of fumbles the Weeping Angels a little bit, it does use them for the benefit of the plot of this episode. And the plot of this episode is still good. You have the threat of the unknown with the crack in the wall. I like all of the stuff with the soldiers. I like all of the stuff. Is it Ian Glenn, who plays Jorah Mormont in Game of Thrones? He's in this episode as Father Octavian. I think his performance is phenomenal. His death scene is great. I like the little twist where the Doctor has his coat back, and it plays a part later on in a future episode. I do like that. We'll talk about that when we get there. I think these are absolutely B-tier episodes. They just have a lot of elements. Whereas Vampires of Venice has stuff that balances itself out to be a B-tier episode, or a C-tier episode rather, this two-parter has enough good things going for it, in my opinion, that it cancels out the bad things to make a B-tier episode. That's where they're sitting for me. We move up to A-tier now. We still have 6 episodes left, and they're all A-tier for me. Bottom of that is going to be A Christmas Carol. Now, a lot of people think this is the best Christmas special. I disagree. I don't love this episode as much as other people. I think there are significantly better Christmas episodes. This episode has always kind of bored me, actually. I think the performances are great. I think Michael Gambon is great in his dual role. I like the Dickens aspect of it. I like the whole idea. It's a Stephen Moffat idea. He actually used it. I can't remember which of his books he used it in, but in the 90s when Stephen Moffat was writing Doctor Who novels, he used the element of going back in time to change a person's time stream. I like that element of this. I think this episode's too dark, like physically too dark. And I think that takes away from the atmosphere. I think the Doctor is characterized weird in this episode, a little inconsistently. All of the elements with like the space fish and the shark, I don't think blend very well together. I think Amy and Rory being sidelined kind of takes away from this episode as well. It takes away from a lot of that momentum at the end of season 5. That being said, it's still got a lot of good elements. Like I said, I like the story. I like this idea of changing someone for the better by going back in their past. I like the sacrifice of this episode. I like that the Doctor has the final word, being the smartest person in the room. But there are also things that I think detract from it. And that's, I don't have a ton to say on this episode. I've never loved this episode, but I think its quality is still pretty high. And so I will put it bottom of A tier. Then, oh gosh. Okay. I'm sticking with this decision. Vincent and the Doctor. Here's why I have it so low. Cast, take out of your mind the final 5 minutes of this episode. What do you have? You have a story about Vincent van Gogh. I'm American, so we say Vincent van Gogh, so I'll probably use them interchangeably here. If you take away the last 5 minutes of this episode, what you have is a story about one man's struggle with mental health and 2 other characters trying to fix that. That's good. That's really good. If that were the only thing going on in this episode, this would be an A tier episode. And then if you add that 5 minutes onto the end, it is also an A tier episode, if not an S tier episode. The problem with this episode is the monster. Everything involving the Crephaeus is misjudged. If this were a pure historical talking about mental health and exploring a time traveler's ability to try to change a person's opinion on their self and their life, I think this is absolutely S tier, if not the best episode in Doctor Who. But they had to add the sci-fi elements. And the CGI is bad. The development of the characters because of the monster is bad. They basically just puffed out the runtime by adding this alien that is supposed to represent the unseen horror that Vincent van Gogh is feeling. But it doesn't work effectively. At least, in my opinion, it doesn't work effectively. I think they could have done a lot better with the use of the Crephaeus. If what they're going for there, and the writers have said, what they were going for is a visual representation of depression. I don't think that's done well. You want to see a good visual representation of depression, go see the Dementors in Harry Potter. The Crephaeus isn't it, and it detracts from the episode's quality. I still think this episode is great. I absolutely think it's A tier. But there is wasted time in this episode trying to make it a sci-fi show when this episode didn't need to be portrayed. This episode could fit in a sci-fi show literally based on the time travel aspect. You did not have to add an alien to it to make it a sci-fi episode, and it detracts from the episode. And for me, that's why this sits as the 5th best episode of Series 5 of Doctor Who. That being said, Pandorica Opens Big Bang is next. Pandorica Opens is definitely first, and Big Bang second. There's a couple reasons for that, and it has to go with this idea that the second half of all of these two-parters is always weaker than the first. It's a constant thing that happens in Doctor Who. The first half of this episode is phenomenal. The speech, the whole atmosphere, Stonehenge being a plot device, River Song being added. I like the montage at the beginning, even if it doesn't really mean anything for the overall, like... It does, but it doesn't. It doesn't quite affect the story as well as I think they were going for, at least in my opinion. I think this story could work without all the painting nonsense. but it does tie a neat little bow on the series as a whole. I think it sets up this huge threat. It does great by building tension. I like that. This is the third time I've mentioned it in this story. I like the whole feeling of terror, the whole feeling of dread at the end of this episode where the doctor is imprisoned, Amy's dead. I like the fact that there's no music at the end of this episode. I think that was a phenomenal production decision. And then the second half of it is fumbled. Big Bang is a little too comedic for its own good. It doesn't take itself very seriously, whereas the first half of this episode took itself very seriously. And those two things don't combine very well. What Big Bang has that I do really like is them playing with time. I do like that element of it, even if they kind of use it in a comedic sense. I like them playing with time. I like them calling back to past episodes. I really like the inclusion of the forest scene from Flesh and Stone in this episode. I think the Doctor, by the end of this episode, is characterized very well. The first half is a little shaky, and it definitely lessens the momentum of the first half of this episode. But I think as a whole, this is one of the best finales of Moffat's run. I think it sits pretty solidly at middle to top of A tier. There's one I have above it in A tier though, and that is Amy's Choice. Now this is a kind of a Doctor Light episode. It's more focused on Amy. This episode, I think, does wonders for her character. It kind of brings back that focus to her relationship with Rory that I think we were missing in the last couple episodes, that I think we miss later on in Series 6 and Series 7. I think Toby Jones is always good. I love Toby Jones. I think him as the Dream Lord is a great inclusion. Part of me really wants the Dream Lord to make at least one reappearance in the main series, but at the same time, I think part of that greatness of his performance is in that mystique of we only have him for one episode. I think the threats in this episode are a little lackluster, but the characters and the performances make them feel greater than they actually are. I mean, old people killing everyone in a village and a star that they're going to fly into and die don't seem like great threats on their own, but when you see the way the characters react to them, they feel like greater threats than they are. So I think the performances in this episode are great. I think this might be one of Karen Gillan's best performances. I like Toby Jones in it. I like Arthur Darvill in it. I like Matt Smith in it. I think this is a very good... This feels like... How do I describe it? This feels like an episode you could forget about, and then as soon as you're reminded of it, you're like, oh yeah, that was a great episode. Like, I love that episode. I can't believe I forgot about it. What would it, like, it feels kind of like an afterthought episode, or like it doesn't fit in the rest of the series. And part of that is the timeline thing. And I think like an episode like Blink fits that description really well. This feels like a, how do I describe it? It almost feels like Blink in that sense. And what I mean by that is this feels like an episode that you could put anywhere, and it doesn't matter where you fit it in the timeline. It makes sense. Like it stands out of time of the rest of the series. And I do really like that. I like this episode a lot. This is always one I'll go back to if I just want to watch a Series 5 episode. I think Amy's Choice is usually the first one I'd go back to and watch. But it has some competition in that, because I might choose the 11th Hour. The only Series 5 episode that I have an S tier is the 11th Hour. The 11th Hour, I think, is one of the best episodes. It's one of the best episodes of Doctor Who, but it's also the best episode in the entire show's history in introducing a Doctor. You look at Rose might be up there, but Rose isn't a great episode. Go check out my Series 1 episode if you disagree. I look at all of the past Doctors and their introductory episodes, right? Unearthly Child isn't a great episode. Oh gosh, what was the first episode of Patrick Troughton's run? I can't remember off the top of my head. That wasn't a good episode. In my boring kind of. It's also 60s, but that aside, Third Doctor, his first episode was what? Spearhead from Space. It's okay. Fourth Doctor was Robot. I don't love Robot. Fifth Doctor, I can't remember his first episode, so it's forgettable. Sixth Doctor was Twin Dilemma. That sucks. Seventh Doctor was Time in the Ronnie. I don't love season 24 by any means. Rose is up there. I don't think the Christmas Invasion is a good episode for the 10th Doctor character development. I think New Earth and Series 2 puts it into perspective way better. And then Capaldi had Deep Breath, and Jodie Whittaker had The Woman Who Fell to Earth, which is a mess. We'll get there. The 11th Hour is a great episode and introduces a new companion, a new doctor, a new world, essentially, a new story arc, near perfectly in 45 minutes. Matt Smith jumps literally out of the TARDIS gates like perfectly. I don't think an actor has understood his portrayal of the Doctor better than Matt Smith right off the bat, to the point where the 11th Doctor gets worse the more you watch him, which is really sad. But whereas most doctors or most actors who play the Doctor come into their own, the longer their tenure goes on, Matt Smith is the exact opposite. It was obvious by the end of Series 7 that he wanted to be done with the character. Stephen Moffat wanted to be done with the character. The show was losing so much momentum. They just had nowhere to go. And that is a downside to how effective this first episode is. I think the elements with Amy's character, her being a child, meeting the Doctor, and then not meeting him again until she's an adult, I think that's a great storyline. I like all of the stuff with the people in the town. I think Rory is really well characterized right off the bat. I like the stuff with Jeff. I like the stuff... Mrs. I can't remember her name. The elderly woman at the beginning. Olivia Colman is wasted. That's kind of my only problem with this episode. Like, the CGI isn't phenomenal, but it probably stood up really well in 2010 through probably 2015. Like, I'm not disappointed with the CGI in this episode as much as I think the worst element of this episode is Olivia Colman being wasted. But all in all, this episode is almost perfect. If you want to get your friend to start watching Doctor Who, this is one of, like, I could give you 5 episodes to start watching, and this one would probably make the most sense for them to start at. This is the easiest jumping off point for anyone who wants to start watching Doctor Who. Especially, like, you shouldn't skip series 1 through 4, but I think this is, if they want to start further on in the series because it just seems like such an expansive series, Series 5 would be the best place for them to jump on. I think it doesn't really rely on much of the past of the Doctor, which it can be a good thing. And this episode does it perfectly. This episode is phenomenal. I'll sing its praises. If you want a more in-depth analysis of this episode, go check out literally any other Doctor Who content creator. People love this episode for good reason. It's great. It handles character. It handles world building. It sets the tone for a Moffat era that I wish we could have had because we didn't quite get it. But that being said, here's how things line up. Series 5 and the Christmas special. Number 14, bottom of D tier, is The Beast Below. 13, Victory of the Daleks. 12, Cold Blood. 11, The Lodger. Then we move up to C tier. Number 10 is Vampires of Venice. Moving up to B tier, number 9, we have The Hungry Earth. 8 is Flesh and Stone. Yes, Flesh and Stone is the second one. Number 7 is Time of Angels. We move up to A tier. Bottom of A tier, number 6, I have A Christmas Carol. 5 is Vincent and the Doctor. 4 is Big Bang. 3, Pandorica Opens. 2, top of A tier, Amy's Choice. And then S tier, number 1, my favorite episode, the best episode in my opinion in Series 5 is The 11th Hour. Let me know what you guys think below. We will continue this tomorrow, actually, with our Series 6 episode. And then, of course, don't miss our double week live streams on Monday and the following Monday, where we talk all things Doctor Who, especially ahead of the 60th anniversary special. But that being said, there's more Doctor Who content over on that corner there and more channel stuff above my head. Thank you very much for watching. We will see you very soon.